Although Nigeria depends heavily on the oil industry for its budgetary revenues, something like 90% of foreign earnings, Nigeria's agriculture sector features prominently in the country's efforts to diversify the economy. Joining us now on the significance and the importance of agriculture in Nigeria is Akin Laoye, who's the Executive Director of FTN Cocoa Processors, who joins us on the show. Akin Laoye, thank you very much for coming through. Has the profile of agriculture really changed in Nigeria? Because since independence, there's been a systematic drop in the region of about 30% in terms of agricultural contribution to GDP.
Well, at some point in the life of the country since independence, we had some concerted effort at changing the situation, especially during the Obasanjo regime. There was so much emphasis on non-oil exports, with agriculture as the focus. To that extent, it was okay, but after that time, we are not seeing a big push from the present administration.
Okay, now in terms of people employed in the sector, the statistics show that 60 to 70% of Nigerians are actually active within the agricultural sector, but without an impetus in terms of investment, financing and markets. What's the earning potential for anybody in that sector?
The earning potential is very low, and it is because there is no concerted effort at making sure that agri products are well preserved, so that when we have the period of when we are not harvesting, they can push it out to the market. So for that reason, the sector is not attractive to people, and because the income there is very low. People see farming in Nigeria as a no-go area.
Okay. 80% of those involved in the farming activity are smallholders, so there's a vulnerability here. But additional vulnerabilities, Akin, are presented by issues such as not enough research being done on soil quality, not enough support being provided on fertilizer and farming inputs, for instance, and a weakness, we're told, in storage facility. Harvest losses in Nigeria are reported to be between 20 to 40% per annum.
That's true. The problem we have here is that there's no deliberate government policy. Where government has announced policies, they don't pursue it with vigor. Why? Because there's so much distraction coming from oil earnings. You know, so if situation will change, then government has to really support the research of organizations. They need to support importation of fertilizer, or probably develop fertilizer from the oil we produce in Nigeria. But you see, because the focus is not strong enough, the sector is not doing well at all. It's basically at the subsistence level, which cannot keep the farmer and the community. It's only enough for the farmer and maybe his immediate family.
All right, Akin, at the moment, a lot is being said in Nigeria about establishing an asset management company to mop up toxic assets in banks so that at least you can try to re-inject credit into the market, liquidity. A lot of these issues have been debated on this show over the last few days as people are looking for solutions as to how to fund business and provide credit facilities. How strongly does agriculture feature in the plans going forward for enterprise development?
Well, as it is now, I do not see any policy that is very strong for agriculture. It is true this administration introduced the 200 billion agri facility as a kind of bailout, but the fact remains that most of the farmers are unable to access this money. So we need government to make the banks know that it's a priority sector. We also need government to know that the farmers they must start from somewhere. A lot of them do not have collaterals to be able to secure money from the banks. Therefore, giving them money is like creating a bad risk asset, which is not attractive to the banks in Nigeria. We need government to do much more than what they are doing. Like they have done for the stock market, there should be a deliberate policy to say this is for the agri sector, recognizing that investors will not want to come in there because the payback is very long, and also because there's risk of storage. If you have big farms, where do you store your products during the harvest period? These are things that are not in place. There's no infrastructure. There's no way you can get to the farms. There's no way you can get to the rural areas. We need government to do much more than they are doing. And if they do that, I'm sure that we can solve the problem of unemployment in the country, and we will move towards food security in the country.
All right, Akin Laoye, thank you very much for your inputs. I just want to bring our guest host into this one. Nigeria is a net importer of food, and yet it has the potential to be self-sufficient in terms of food security. We heard earlier on that in the administration of President Obasanjo, at the start of democracy, there was a heavy focus on agriculture, but that somewhere along the line, that momentum has dried up. Policy that's needed right now to galvanize agriculture in a country like Nigeria?
Well, firstly, it's quite important for government at this juncture, given the fragmentation of entrepreneurs and smallholders, that government does provide infrastructure such as silos, so that any excess can be stored for future dry season. But more importantly is that, unlike us in South Africa, but South Africa, we used to have cooperatives where people will come together and do that, and then eventually we deregulated. So Nigeria, because already a free market, I think they shouldn't, government's role should just be providing infrastructure so that they don't find themselves in a situation whereby they end up having food prices being controlled. Because although it might be good for the consumer, for the farming community, it's not very, very good because they get a very poor price.
And just very briefly, I mean, a country like Malawi is now being held up as the right approach to agriculture, where the government has deliberately provided subsidies for farming inputs such as fertilizers and changed the grain marketing system so that the goods that get to market do get to market and the farmer gets more than the cost of production. Do you need that level of government intervention? And once the government withdraws, what sort of distortions will exist in the market?
Well, in Malawi, it's an outlier because that's the core of the economy. And so in that sense, we cannot use it and use some of the examples to generalize. So for Malawi, it's quite critical for them because the economy is not diversified. Agriculture is the biggest sector in the economy, and it makes sense for the state to make sure that the inputs are supplied freely or at least at a discount, so that entrepreneurs and the sector can have them and continue to sustain the economy, because without agriculture, that economy will collapse.